The second biggest spread of Wild Card Week is the Packers versus Cowboys, and I can understand why the spread is as large as it is, but I think this game is going to be pretty close. And the biggest reason for that is when you think of the Cowboys, you think of a dominant pass rush, and they have that and then some with Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, etc. But the thing is, the Packers are very well equipped to protect against this dominant pass rush because no matter how you slice it, they rank very highly in all of the metrics for pass protection. In pass block win rate, which is the ESPN stat for pass protection, they are second best in that stat. And then in PFF's pass blocking grade, they are sixth best. So they are elite in every which way. And that's the first step you need to be able to handle the Cowboys. If you don't have a great pass protection, you're probably going to be in for a long day unless you just have elite receiving options that can get open in a second, because that's all you're going to have if you don't have that great protection. And speaking of weapons, the Packers have the weapons to go against this great secondary of the Cowboys as well. You have obviously Deron Bland, who has had a historic season this year with the most pick sixes in NFL history. Then Stephon Gilmore is no slouch himself. He's probably a top 3 secondary corner in football. So that's a great corner duo. But the Packers have Christian Watson, who can provide some attacking prowess on the outside. Then you have Romeo Doubs as well, another solid option. And then Jaden Reed is really going to be essential for the Packers because Jordan Lewis is okay, but he's probably more of a replacement level coverage player than he is anything else. He is exceptional as a run defender, actually, so he does provide that, but he is just not very good in coverage, and he's going to be lined up against Jaden Reed quite often, so Reed could be able to have some success against Lewis. With all that said, the Packers offense is going to be able to attack this Dallas defense with some proficiency. I don't expect the Packers to just wipe the floor with this Dallas defense because at the end of the day, it is tremendously talented. But you have all of this great talent in addition to Jordan Love being a top 5 quarterback for basically the entire second half of the season. And if you want to look at it holistically, Jordan Love was about a top 10 quarterback for the season. So he was great in any way you look at the season, but especially as of lately. And if I'm Dallas, I'm a little bit nervous about that, but I also like how Dallas matches up with the Green Bay defense because basically everything Green Bay struggles with, Dallas naturally wants to attack anyways. Green Bay really gives up a lot of short yardage plays. If you follow ThatFranchiseGuy on YouTube, he'll tell you Joe Barry is a frustrating defensive coordinator for that very reason. He plays extremely passively. And the Cowboys, they'll eat you up with dinking and dunking. They, if they can, they'll do 20 slants to CeeDee Lamb. And they'll have no issue with that. They'll have success with it because Lamb is a great route runner and he's also great after the catch. So you're not just going to get, 5 yards from the slant. You're going to get those 5 yards and then you're going to get 6 after the catch as well. And Brandon Cooks is going to have success against Carrington Valentine as well. So there is a lot of success through the passing for Dallas because Keyshawn Nixon, I didn't mention, he is going to be lined up against CeeDee Lamb a lot of the time. And Nixon is also in that replacement level sort of territory. He's about average, maybe a little bit below average as a nickel corner. So there is going to be a lot of success to be had for Dallas. The one thing that I'd be a little bit nervous for them is Rashawn Gary is an elite pass rusher. He is one of the approximately 40 elite pass rushers in the NFL this year. There are just so many to pick from. It's so hard to really key into any one pass rusher because there are just so many elite ones. But Rashawn Gary is elite as well, and he is going to have a field day against Terrence Steele, who is one of the worst pass protecting tackles in football. So I think there is some reason to be a little bit nervous for Dallas, but if they get the ball out quickly enough, it won't really matter. Rashawn Gary is a freak, but he can only get it in so quickly. Lamb might be separating before the pressure comes in. So with all this said, what do I think is going to be the deciding factor? I think that the boxing term styles make the fight is very relevant in this game because Dallas is not going to have any issue playing any sort of way in this game. Offensively, they're going to be playing how they want to, and defensively, they're good enough that even if it's not necessarily the most effective way to play against the opponent, they're good enough that they'll be able to play in the man coverage heavy way that they want to play. So, yes, Bland might get beaten by Watson on some plays, and Lewis might get beat by Reed on some instances, but I think that Dallas has a good enough defense that they'll be able to cover just fine for the most part. And this pass rush, though I typically adhere to the belief that a good pass protection is going to outweigh good pass rush, this pass rush for Dallas is filthy. And I think they'll still have times that they'll be able to make Jordan Love's day miserable. And I didn't even touch upon Dak Prescott. He's been elite all year. Jordan Love really came on the second half of the season, but Dak Prescott has been elite for the entire year. He's been at a minimum a top 5 quarterback, probably closer to top 2 or top 3 for the year. So I have faith that Dallas will be able to win this, but I think this is going to be a very close game. And I think if they cover the 7 points that Vegas has given them, it's going to be a sort of late game cover where it just comes on with a few minutes left in the fourth quarter. I think this game is going to be close all the way through. Sunday's night game is just absolutely beautiful because the storylines are there with Matt Stafford taking on the team he led for a decade and Jared Goff going against the team he took to the Super Bowl. And the matchups on the field are excellent as well. There's a lot of arguments for either team, hence Detroit being just given the 3 points that home teams are usually given. This is a really interesting matchup, and one of the things that makes it so interesting is there's pros and cons on the same aspect of the game for both teams. So, what I mean by that is if you're Detroit, you have one of the 3 best offensive lines in football. So, you feel confident about how you match up against everybody except for Aaron Donald and Kobe Turner. If you're the Rams, you feel good that Aaron Donald and Kobe Turner are on your team because they're going to be able to cause some havoc against Jared Goff. And that's one thing that Jared Goff has always struggled with is anytime he's pressured, he sort of folds. And that's especially true with pressure up the middle. Any quarterback is going to struggle with pressure up the middle, but especially an immobile quarterback like Goff that is just really going to not be able to make any plays with his feet. And he's going to need to get rid of the ball extremely quickly because the pressure is coming up as short of a distance as it possibly can. So it's really going to be a battle between just how well are the tackles handling the edge rushers for the Rams, because really there's not a real threat on the edge for the Rams unless they move Aaron Donald out to edge, which I don't suspect that they will. There's not going to be really anybody that's a threat on the edge. And Penei Sewell is maybe the best tackle in football. Then Taylor Decker is a really solid tackle in his own right as well. So the Lions should be able to contain all the pressure on the outside, and that will then allow them to really put their focus into stopping the interior pressure. So they should be able to protect Goff for the most part. It's just going to be a question of how big of an issue is that interior pressure going to be when it rears its ugly head against Jared Goff. And another thing is that for the Lions offense, we don't know if Sam Laporta is playing, first of all. So that's a big question mark. And I tend to think if he does play, that's a pretty big advantage because Ernest Jones is a solid coverage linebacker, but he's not necessarily in that Fred Warner territory. He's just solid. So that's going to be an edge for the Lions if Laporta does play, that really there's not going to be anybody to really stop him for the Rams. And another matchup is you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is probably the best slot receiver in football. And I'd say the second best behind CeeDee Lamb. But either way, he's elite. And he's going to be matched up against Quentin Lake a lot because Lake is the nickel corner for the Rams. He's also the best corner for the Rams. So things kind of match up pretty nicely for the Rams, and it makes for just a great matchup in this game where you have the best for the Rams going against the best for the Lions. And I think Lake will actually be able to hold his own against St. Brown. He's not as good of a player as St. Brown is, but you have a solid corner against a great receiver. That's a matchup you're willing to accept if you're the Rams. Another key aspect for the Lions offense is going to be establishing the run, because they are a really effective rushing team. They are 5th in yards per attempt, and the Rams, they kind of struggled to stop the run as they were 17th in yards allowed rushing per attempt. So that's something the Rams are really going to need to buckle down and make sure the Lions don't just run away with the game, literally. And that's a question mark because Aaron Donald can make splash plays and get in the backfield by himself. Bobby Brown is a good fundamental run defender. He's a big body. Kobe Turner is also a solid run defender in his own right. So they have guys to stop the run. But again, the edge room leaves a lot to be desired. There's not really a great run defending edge player, just in the same way there's not really a great pass rushing edge for the Rams. So I think the Lions will be able to have some success rushing the ball. And I think the same is not going to be true for the Rams, because moving to the other side of the ball, the Lions are even better at stopping the run than they are establishing it, as they are third best in yards allowed per attempt rushing, and the Rams are about average as they're 12th in yards per attempt rushing themselves. I think that's going to be an issue for the Rams because they are going to be going against a lethal pass rush in Aiden Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil. So that paired with the Rams not having the greatest of offensive lines, it's actually one of the worst in football. That's a bit worrisome. But one thing that they do have working in their favor is Matt Stafford has just been incredible throughout the season, and he's been great under pressure, even. That's one thing that differentiates him from Goff is when the pressure's on, he can still make plays. He's not really a mobile quarterback, much in the same way that Goff is not mobile, but he can still make plays when he's pressured. And he has receivers to help him as well, because you have Puka Nakua, who is I would say top 10 receiver in the league. Then you have Cooper Kupp, who had a bit of a down year this year compared to what he was trending towards, but he is still a fantastic receiver. And then honestly, Demarcus Robinson is a good tertiary weapon as well. So they have some options. And I think they'll be able to separate pretty quickly, which will minimize the Lions' pass rush. And an evidence of that is the fact that the Lions were 27th in passing yards allowed, which bodes really nicely for the Rams because they were a top 10 passing offense in yards, which I think actually doesn't entirely do them justice because Matt Stafford was a top 5 quarterback this year in my eyes. So I think they're even a little bit better than that would suggest. But just take it for what it is. If you have the 10th best offense against a bottom 6 defense, that is a very nice matchup for the Rams. And I think that's going to be probably what separates this is there's just more of an avenue for the Rams to have passing success than there is for the Lions. And I like to trust the better quarterback in games that are close. And it's a game that's close. Matt Stafford is better than Jared Goff. I think that's pretty well established at this point. Goff is good in his own right, but Stafford has been elite this season. And there's just not really a avenue for the Lions to stop the pass against this Rams offense, aside from just getting insanely fast pressure that is going to be hard to consistently do because the Rams are going to be separating very quickly on their own. So to get in before the separation occurs, I think that's going to be a tough task for the Lions. And that's why I actually lean the Rams here. I think they'll be able to win as an underdog in Detroit, even with the fans being raucous, with them finally having a home game in the playoffs. I think this is going to be a close game, but I think the Rams will be able to take it.